Okay, all my conversations and talk recently about embassies and the fact that when you leave the United States, you're on your own. Well, we have someone from the Department of State who's actually going to answer some questions for us today as far as what does an embassy actually do. Follow along.
You're watching dcbornrob, erasing borders. And now, the news.
Okay, so good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is you're located, and thanks for watching. You saw my video yesterday about discussing about the possibility of having a PAC. Well, we also want to know what goes on inside of an embassy, and I brought that up as well. And I always get questions on, well, why don't you go to the embassy? Why don't you ask the embassy this? And that they are the be all and the end all, but they may not. They may not be the ones that are actually making the decisions themselves at all. So I am lucky enough to have actually our moderator of our group, Luis, here. I'm not going to say his whole name, but Luis actually has insight on what goes on at an embassy. So welcome to the show, Luis.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back again.
Yeah. So let's do this. Tell me what you do first of all. What your position is first.
Well, I work for the Department of State, and Department of State, as you know, is the federal government's largest agency that deals with foreign affairs. Now, I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a politician. I'm not a specialist in foreign affairs, but I work for the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, and they're in charge of security domestically and internationally, and that includes consulates, embassies, and diplomatic posts in the United States. And even as something as simple as your passport and processing, and don't blame me for the long queues of the passport. But basically, I work for an outfit that's in charge. It's actually basically the law enforcement of the State Department, and that also includes diplomatic security service, which is more of like for years it's been kind of like a hidden entity that it's not well known, but I kind of consider them as a secret service little brother. And their job are basically protecting consulates all over the world, embassies, ambassadors, foreign delegations, and that's what I do. I mean, I've had a long history of different titles, from everything from canine training to explosive detection, surveillance, intelligence. But somehow I ended up here with the government, and it's not what I chose to do, but I guess fate somehow dropped me in there, and here I am.
There you go. Well, so you basically understand how it all operates. And I'm just going to rattle off a few questions, answer what you can. If you can't answer it, don't worry about it. Just say pass or skip or whatever you want to do to get to the next one, or just say you don't want to answer. But so I'll start with the first one. So what services do embassies offer?
Well, embassies is not just, well, let's just first of all, embassies are a representation of one's country in a foreign country. So basically, they offer a multitude of services, everything from visas for the foreign locals who want to visit the country, to passport services for local citizens, and emergency aid for citizens abroad as well. That also includes services that are not available, that's not actually available to the average citizen. I mean, the embassies in a certain country, there's an embassy in every country, but they also have multitudes of tasks, such as, for example, they have people that are specialized in commerce. They have people that are basically specializing in negotiation within that certain country. Those people are specializing, like, say, for example, Latin America or certain, Colombia, or people who are into that foreign affairs type of situation, and they specialize and they get assigned to certain areas of the world, and that's what they do. It could be everything from terrorism assistance. It could be everything from economy. So there's different track fields, and also there's also law enforcement assistance as well, in terms of American law enforcement, federal law enforcement assistant, foreign law enforcement, such as, for example, the American government assisting the Colombian police department. So there are multitude of things, and that are not just available. They are basically available to U.S. citizens because that's what they do. But there's also things that the American government does within the confines of the embassy. It's basically a giant hub of activity that pertains to a specific country.
Okay, since you named all the different positions, I'm going to skip ahead 2 questions and ask what, I don't know if there's an average, but about how many people work in an embassy, in an average embassy. I mean, I don't even know if there's an average. Larger countries probably have a larger embassy, a larger presence, but I mean, how many different job positions are in an embassy?
So it all depends on the country. Like for example, you have embassies and then you have consulates. Consulates are the embassy. It's just that, let's say, for example, let's say you want to go to the Colombian embassy in DC. There's only one embassy and it's located in DC, but you live in LA and you need a special papers. So basically you will go to a consulate. So it's a smaller branch of an embassy that's spread out through other cities around the country. The same thing with the embassy, American embassy. Now it depends on the location. For example, it can range from hundreds to thousands, but it can be really remote. And for example, probably some desert in Central Africa, and it depends on the presence of all the footprint of the United States. So there's many different factors that can have. I say probably between a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand, and that also includes for example, locals. They also hire locals to do security. Regular local security. It could be locals that help processing. They're vetted as well. For example, situation in Russia, there's no visa processing in Russia because of the diplomatic climate. So what happened? So the Russian government had beef with the United States. They barred the United States, I believe, from hiring locals. And the United States said, you know what, you want to bar locals from working with us? Okay, no problem. No visa services for anyone, unless you're a U.S. citizen. So now you're in a stalemate. That's a Russian problem. But as you can see, like there's different things there's many facets of responsibilities, and it can range a large number to a very small number.
So a large, I don't know if that's a large number or not. 1,000, I think that's a lot. In one embassy, the buildings are that big where there's 1,000 people, because when someone on the outside like myself reaches in and I get the responses that I do, I can't help but wondering, are there 2 people in the building? Are there 2 people responsible for responding to emails? And here's another question. I didn't even write this one down. Why, when they correspond with you, and in particular in my case, and they respond to the emails, I get an auto reply, that comes within minutes. And then 2 days later, I get a response. It never has a person's name inside that email. Is there a reason for that?
Most of the emails might be like, they'll probably see your response, but a lot of the replies might be scripted. And it's very common towards the corporate world. When I used to work in the corporate world, I used to work for AIG and Goldman, and I used to do something similar. I used to do like threat assessments, travel security for executives, and their family used to go down to these high risk level countries, and I would have to assess the situation for them. And sometimes they'll ask questions and generate emails. Sometimes the emails would be very generic, very predictive, where my name wouldn't be on it because it would be coming from a generic reply that had the same response or a scripted response. It might not. I believe that's just pretty much the situation. They just, someone reads it and someone sends out a generic email to your response. My other guess would be it might be they don't want to be identified, but that's highly uncommon.
Well, I'm going to lean towards that because my responses had to be specific because I asked some specific questions. So it could have been a canned response, but even still, I mean, it's just like a business. Any business you go to, you would expect for the manager to say who they are and not hide.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are personnel. I mean, there are things that happen. Like, for example, there might be an investigation, like the Reed case. It might be an ongoing case, but there are situations that happen that certain individuals can't disclose information. And they may say some things that just to give you a glimpse, but due to the mechanism that exists in an embassy or any federal organization, it's very micromanaged. And in order to disclose certain situations, they have to get authorized. And it doesn't mean that, well, the ambassador of the embassy might get involved, and she might not have the power to, or he or she might not have the power to authorize a disclosure. It might have to be something to do with the regional security officers, or some, which are the people who investigate fraud, and there's actually a law enforcement of the embassy, but they don't really get involved in such cases. It usually has to do with someone within the civil affairs office of an embassy that deals with matters that regarding citizens abroad who get into a jam or in a situation. It's almost like a public PR. They're trying to not disclose as much information, but at the same time, they may not want to disclose a lot of information, because disclosing too much information might have some sort of sensitive information inadvertently be disclosed to you. And it's a lot of top secret, sensitive, and that's not a secret thing to amongst the population. But there are certain things that you try to limit not to communicate, because the more we talk, the more things we disclose without knowing. And the State Department is very sensitive on that, and they try to keep it short and sweet. If it doesn't have to be disclosed, they won't say it.
And I get that part of it, but you would figure that they would communicate with the family of a deceased American citizen in that country that they're responsible for. But I get what you're saying. And we're going to have to take it another level. And I mean, we realize it's a game they're playing, and we just have to play the game, figure out how the rules are, which is one reason I appreciate you coming on. Well, let me ask you this. Will an embassy help you if you find yourself in a foreign country's legal system?
No, they won't help you, but they will help you in terms of making sure you're not abused, tortured, and treated like a human being. Now, is it perfect? I've heard stories. I believe the brothers in Ecuador, they were in they're still in jail, in prison, and I believe they claimed they were in a very tight spot and dangerous, endangered general population of the system, But the embassy's job is just to make sure that the authorities of that country, it doesn't, mistreat you or violate your human rights. Is it perfect? I don't think it is. Does it happen? Probably, most likely, but I can't say for sure on how effective each embassy, because remember, each embassy has their own motorized mechanism. Mm-hmm. And but in terms of legal, no, they won't help you. The reason why is that it's like you're going to another country and you're telling the cops what to do and do their job. You're telling the government how to do and what to do and how to do their job. Mm-hmm. It's the same expected here. As for example, if a tourist here gets robbed or gets killed or something happens to a tourist, we can't let a foreign police department, a foreign law enforcement agency come here and investigate on our sovereign land. The same thing goes for when we're in their land. There's some sort of mutual respect or jurisdiction when it comes to that, and it's diplomacy. And there's some weird rules with diplomacy, like it's a culture. And one of the main things that, unfortunately, that American citizens discover, and only discover when they're in the jam, is that the American government won't help them. And the main reason is because of that. It's just that the government can't do much. They can, for example, in the Reed case, the government can offer assistance to the investigation, but they can offer it, but it's up to the Colombian government. Or the Colombian government might say, you know what, in America, we need your assistance. You have better investigative tools than us, but let us take the lead. Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly happened there. Did the American government ask for assistance? Did the Colombian government ask for assistance? Maybe nothing happened. The Colombian government might want to take the charge and do it themselves. A lot of dynamics. And And that's the main reason they won't help you, because they can't step on those toes, because that's their country, that's their land, and it's expected here as well. Like, someone from Colombia something might happen here, and we can't let the Colombian government come here and conduct forensics. And it's our terms, our land, same thing on their side.
Mm-hmm. I get that, and I'm going to ask you off camera some more questions later.
Yeah.
I don't want to breach on that subject too much on the Reed case or the brothers really, but I have a few others that I have off to the side, other questions. So, what's the number one priority of a foreign embassy? Is it the citizens, U.S. citizens, or foreign relations?
Well, it's usually I would like to say it's foreign relations, but it all depends how if something happens to a citizen, like how big of a noise can it make? It can change. It's very fluid. I mean, I'm trying to think of one example. For example, like I remember reading a story about two journalists or humanitarians that got kidnapped in Somalia by the Al-Shabaab terrorist group. They were kidnapped for, I think, weeks or months, and guess what? The government sent the military, the Navy SEAL, and rescued them. But why? Because it became a high profile. It became a noise started happening, circulating over the internet. It became a trend. It became a viral. The family went on the camera to talk and plead with the government to help them. Nothing happened, but the government did something, and they did it without talking, only for it to discover what happened after they were rescued. It's not the same situation with the brothers in Ecuador or anywhere else, but the priority can change. Priority can change because, for example, the most important thing is the relations between the American government and the host government. And the American government can pretty much manipulate a lot of things. They can say, do this or our relations will cease, and that small country or that small government that's kind of a little weak may say, we need the United States, we better make it happen. So it can flop. And I'll say it's like both, but the relations takes priority instantly. It all depends on what happens or what situation is with the citizen and how bad it is. Did something happen to them because the foreign government abused their power? Or did something happen because the citizen found themselves in a bind, did something bad, they broke laws, they kind of get put on the bottom.
Okay,
So,
well, what if you get caught up in a legal system there and it's proven that they were railroaded? Not speaking of any particular case right now, but let's say the trial was a scam.
mm-hmm.
Should the U.S. government step in at that point if they are aware of it?
They should, and there has been cases of that. Basically of cases of corruption, investigation never really completed, and unfortunately, the citizen or the person in question suffers through it until this process is over. Sometimes they end up serving 2, 3, or 4 years, but only to mysteriously be released on probation. Probation, what? If something happened, there's communication between the embassy and the foreign government that makes things happen. And sometimes it takes that long to resolve things. I mean, you see it all the time. Sometimes an American chooses the wrong path and does something and gets 20 years in a foreign prison, but mysteriously gets released, and it's because there are some sort of communication happening, and the American government is aware that there are people in a foreign legal system jammed up, but it's not speedy. That's for sure. That's not speedy. It's not like here. Unfortunately, here it's not as speedy either. But basically, it's a lot faster than the foreign legal system, where you might be in a bind, not charged with anything for months or years. It's kind of holding you hostage. So the government can, and sometimes they do, but you won't learn about it. It just depends how much noise you make.
Gotcha. Well, I had another question. I'll hold off on that. Let me ask you, what limits do foreign embassies have when assisting citizens?
Like I said, one of the main limits is obviously they really can't help you when it comes to legal trouble. If you went and, for example, you bought a pound of coke or some sort of drug and you used it and started selling whatever you were doing with it, and they caught you, they really can't do much. But the only way they can do is just make sure you're not abused, or if your human rights are preserved, you're not, you're fed. You see, a doctor is seeing, you're able to communicate with your family. One thing they can do is basically, for example, you're in serious danger, and basically, for example, and this happens to also even locals too, like who are not citizens. Immunity, you can't get immunity unless you're in the presence on the ground in the United States. However, if you're in imminent danger and they can see it, they can actually help you evacuate or hold you in the confines of the U.S. Embassy. You're actually like the Assange case, the WikiLeaks founder, who's along with Snowden, who's running around the world because he can't return. He was held up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London because he requested asylum because they was afraid of the United States government's in a statue. And he's lived there for years until one day the Ecuadorian government couldn't handle it anymore and they kind of kicked him out. But basically, they can help you with that. They also, most recent situation was COVID-19. Americans were, scrambling to get out of the country to go back home because borders were closing. And one of the things that we're doing is communicating with individuals in the country and basically coordinating flights, humanitarian flights out of the country. Now, this is why it's so important to enroll in a STEP program for the Department of State, because I always do it. Yeah, I always do it, and something like that happens, and next thing you know, you're jamming your email, you're jamming yourself once you put it on that system. Alert! You're gonna, we highly recommend you evacuate the country. If you need assistance, please report to here. There's only a limit of flights, and now it's up to you to get there. They had been, during COVID-19, that's what they've had. And they had it again during the middle of pandemic because they were Americans stuck in many countries, especially Colombia, especially Central America and South America. And basically they sent out humanitarian commercial flights to pick those people up. And that's one of the many things they do for citizens. And in terms of legal thing, and then of course, obviously you got the obvious passport process. I mean, you got your passport stolen, lost. If you're in Colombia, there used to be a consulate in Medellin. I think they're still there, but it's not operating. It's closed. So what happens if your passport, or if you meet someone on Tinder and that woman steals your passport? Guess what? You're going to go on a very long 8-hour drive to Bogota. So I suggest you keep your passport safe, because the only place you're going to replace it is in U.S. Embassy, Bogota, and basically you don't want to go there. It's just too far if you're in Medellin.
Yeah.
So. But passport, visas, perhaps you had a child with a foreigner, they will process important paperwork like birth certificates, the generic forms of being an American citizen. That's what they do as well.
Okay. So I'm going to I can see this now. These are good answers. I appreciate it, Luis. So I can say right now, this is going to be a part 2 to this one. Okay, next question. When it is clear the rights of a U.S. citizen are being abused or violated by foreign authorities, what can the U.S. Embassy do?
I mean, if it's been proven, obviously, I think it's pretty easy to prove if there's such an incident that's happened. I mean, obviously they'll have marks and injuries, and I believe that things can be done, such as sanctions. The U.S. government can easily revoke certain things. It does it happen? Not that often, because the country is not willing to do that to an American citizen, I mean, they can lose a lot of things. The relations, diplomatic relations, can be tarnished. It may not be tarnished, but they may certainly speed things up to get that American out. You know, that American citizen can be a huge burden on that foreign legal system, because so much attention is focused on the country itself, especially when you have now viewers and the public is noticing. So when it comes to the situations such as abuse and human rights violations, there's several things that can happen, and obviously the embassy will get involved. That's a big no-no. I mean, you know, the prison system here is not perfect either, but they certainly get treated a lot much better than, you know, the Brazilian prison or Venezuelan prison.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So does an embassy only carry out its work autonomously, or are matters of foreign relations cleared at home from Washington, D.C.? Or does everything run from DC, from the Department of State down? Can they make any decisions on their own?
Well, everything is run down from DC. I mean, the State Department is the biggest agency in the federal government, and they handle everything from foreign affairs. They even the Peace Corps has something to do with the State Department. You know, not totally, but it's like an autonomous little sublet. You know, and but basically, everything rolls down from DC. In DC, the president wants something done with a certain country, you know, he rolls down the line, and all the diplomats who specialize in that region, who are based in Colombia, who are based in Brazil or Thailand, you know, those they will carry out those needs. And you know, there's meetings and there's analysis and there's meetings between countries, and you know, ultimately the decision making on how to have a good result on a negotiation is up to the personnel in that country, and the diplomats are in that country, and ambassador who represents the United States within that certain country. That ultimately depends on how the good negotiations are, what, you know, their skills are. So they represent the United States and they carry out their needs from Washington.
That brings up another question, even before I jump into this one. What happens if the embassy, the ambassador has not been sworn in yet?
Oh, for
a specific country, I mean, you pull one out of a hat, Jamaica or wherever. That embassy, I mean, that ambassador has been selected, but because of Congress or Senate, whatever, they have not approved their placement.
Well, there's several ambassadors. There's acting ambassadors in place that are not sworn in like a huge official that you see on TV, but they are leaders who are acting ambassadors of that embassy that will make decisions until the actual one comes in and is placed. Okay. So there's never really a leaderless situation. There's always a leader in a certain embassy or diplomatic post, and basically, I mean, over here as well, like in the United States as well, had a situation where the American ambassador, at one point there was no American ambassador to the United Nations, but there was acting ambassadors, and that held meeting with the United Nations and decided on things, made speeches, negotiated, voted, and the process continues even without an official elected or sworn in ambassador.
Gotcha. Good answer. Somebody's at home, somebody's at work.
We have a YouTube channel, like it.
Please comment and share if you like the video. Please subscribe and kick the bell.